Well, the playoffs are almost here, but first things first, 2 more regular season weeks to see if we can't make some money. Let's try to do just that here in this Week 16 with these best bets. 4 games I'm involved in this week. I'd like to go through them all now quickly. Starting with the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Indianapolis Colts. Kansas City a 6.5-point favorite on BETDAQ, and I do like the Chiefs in this situation. Kansas City playing very well lately, especially on offense. Their offense has just exploded in recent weeks. The Colts are not particularly good on defense. They're especially bad against the run. 29th in the NFL in rushing defense. Chiefs running back Jamal Charles, probably the best running back in the league right now. I think he is going to run wild in this game. And the Indianapolis offense really hasn't been very good for the last 7 weeks. The Colts in general have been very average since losing leading receiver Reggie Wayne 7 weeks ago. But because they've won 4 of their last 7 games, including a 25-3 win over Houston last week, I think they're still overrated. I don't think people have really caught on to the fact this Colts team just average now, but I think we'll see more evidence of that on Sunday in Kansas City. I do expect the Chiefs to win this game handily, cover the 6.5. Next game I'd like to talk about, the New Orleans Saints going on the road to face the Carolina Panthers in a huge game. Carolina a 3-point favorite on BETDAQ. I like the Saints. Listen, I realize Carolina a very popular public bet this week, and I understand why. The Panthers fit the profile of the type of team the Saints struggle with. They have a good defense. They have an offense based around the power running game. We know that New Orleans defense, even though they've been very good this year, they do struggle a bit against the run. And this game, of course, is in Carolina. So the Saints, as we all know, much better in the Superdome. They average 80 more pass yards per game in the Superdome than they do on the road. They'll be on the road here. They just lost on the road in St. Louis last week. But I expect the Saints to rebound and win this game outright. Look, I just think the Saints are better than the Panthers. The Panthers are not the Seattle Seahawks. Yes, they have a defense like Seattle's. They do not have the same type of offense. Carolina, 25th in the NFL in total offense, 29th in pass yards per game. And even their rushing offense not great. Now, they are top 10, 8th in the league in rush yards per game. But Jonathan Stewart out, so they'll be relying on D'Angelo Williams. Really, Cam Newton needs to run the ball for this rushing attack to be what it can be. And Newton hasn't run the ball quite as much this season. The Panthers, of course, were beaten 31-13 in New Orleans 2 weeks ago. Now, I don't put that much stock in that game, except that game does tell me that Drew Brees does know how to attack this Carolina defense. Brees, of course, throwing for 313 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. And even though I don't expect him to do quite as well on the road in Carolina, I do expect him to consistently move this New Orleans offense. And I'm just not sure the Panthers are going to be able to consistently move the ball on a Saints defense that ranks 5th in the NFL in both yards allowed and points allowed. And the New Orleans defense continues to be underrated. The Carolina offense continues to be overrated. I mean, I was reading something the other day on ESPN that talked about what Cam Newton had to do over the last 2 games to get his name into the MVP race. I almost laughed aloud. Cam Newton's pocket passing has not been good this season. His turnovers have been an issue. The Panthers, one of only 5 NFL teams to average fewer than 200 pass yards per game. Now, some of that has to do with the weaponry surrounding Newton. 34-year-old Steve Smith, his best wide receiver, so no doubt he's not surrounded by elite skill position players, but he hasn't been great this season. He just hasn't been. The Carolina offense as a whole has not been great this season. They do have a great defense, but I don't think it's going to be enough against the balanced Saints in a game that really both teams must have. So I like New Orleans +3 on the road in Carolina. Next game I like to talk about, listen, I almost struggle to say this with a straight face. Yes, I am backing the Houston Texans +10.5 at home against the Denver Broncos. I backed the Texans. I think I said in a video early this week, maybe the week preview video we did, or maybe the preview to the Houston-Denver game. I think I've backed the Texans maybe 6 or 7 times this year. I think I've won maybe one of those bets. This team has just cost me money all season, and I swore maybe 3 weeks ago that I was done betting on the Texans for the remainder of the year. But it's a funny thing what I do here at BETDAQ NFL. You know, I'm 2 years into my time here with BETDAQ, and of course I was a serious NFL bettor before starting with BETDAQ. But in years past, you know, you look at the slate of games, and you always know there's 4 or 5 games out of the 13 to 16, depending on whether there's bye weeks or not. There's 4 or 5 games that you just don't like. You're not going to play those games, and so you don't even really handicap. You don't study those games closely. You just sort of leave those games aside. Well, look, this Denver-Houston game would have been one of those games, but Because of what I do here at BETDAQ, previewing every one of these games and looking at each one of these games closely, it's really been interesting over the last couple of years to see how much my opinions have changed throughout the week on some of these games. And if you'd have told me on Monday that I'd be sitting here on Saturday telling you that one of my best bets of the weekend was the Houston Texans, a team that has just killed me this season, at home against the Denver Broncos, a team that can blow anybody out, I would have probably laughed at you. But you know what? After looking at this game very closely, after examining the rest of the opportunities this week, I think Houston plus 10.5, an opportunity that should not be ignored. The main reason I feel that way is because Matt Schaub is at quarterback in place of Case Keenum this week. If you're not familiar with what the Texans have been doing over the last several weeks, they've been starting Case Keenum at quarterback. Now, Keenum, a young guy, was undrafted last season out of the University of Houston, so got a lot of fan support around Houston, and Matt Schaub was brutal over the first half of this season. The coaches obviously felt that TJ Yates was not the future, so they decided to give Keenum a shot. Now, Keenum, as we said, a lot of fan support there in Houston, so the fan base definitely behind the move. And for the first couple of games, he looked okay until the wheels totally fell off. Case Keenum looked as overmatched as I can remember seeing an NFL quarterback look anytime in the last few years anyway. I mean, this guy does not have the size, does not have the pocket presence. He played in a different spread type offense in college where he took just about every snap from the shotgun, so he looked very uncomfortable going through NFL reads and progressions. Looked uncomfortable just taking a snap from under center. The guy was just awful, and he was benched a couple of times, most recently against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Gary Kubiak's last game as a coach. As head coach at Houston, Keenum was benched in the second half after he couldn't get anything going throughout that game. Matt Schaub came in, led the team right up and down the field, did the same thing 3 weeks before then when they played the Oakland Raiders. Keenum was benched in the second half of that game. Again, Schaub came in, led the offense right up and down the field. Houston came up short in both of those games. I believe they'd have won both those games if they would have inserted Schaub sooner. Look, I realize Matt Schaub had a bad start to this season. This is a Pro Bowl quarterback. This is a guy who has played in Pro Bowls in years past, has played at a very high level, and he's still surrounded by some excellent weaponry there in Houston, most notably wide receiver Andre Johnson, who's about to have another 100-catch year. Denver, as we know, bad on defense. They're especially bad in the secondary, 28th in the NFL in passing defense. This is going to be Matt Schaub's final game in Houston. He's facing a terrible defense. I believe the Houston offense is going to have a whole lot of success in this game. And one thing the Texans have been doing all season is playing defense. They're fourth in the NFL in total defense. They're second in passing defense. I realize the Denver offense is the best in the NFL. They have slowed down recently, and they are going to be without Wes Welker again here on Sunday, and they will be facing the second-ranked pass defense in the NFL. So look, I expect Denver to win this game. I expect their offense to produce more than 20 points, but I don't expect them to win this game by more than 10.5. I think Houston, a good bet as a home underdog. And I fully recognize that this is one of those picks that could look way wrong. I mean, would I be shocked if Denver was up 21-0 midway through the second quarter? No, I would not be shocked. So I'm putting it out there. I might get embarrassed. I recognize that. And listen, I wouldn't be putting it out there if I didn't feel really good about it, because as I said, the Texans have cost me a lot of money this season. But you know what? I do feel really good about it. I like the Texans plus 10.5 at home against the Denver Broncos. Final game I want to talk about, I promise I won't talk about it for as long as we just talked about that game. That is the New England Patriots going on the road to face the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore, a 2.5-point favorite on BETDAQ. The public all over the Ravens here, just tripping over themselves to bet on the Ravens, it seems. I like New England. Listen, I'm very well aware the Patriots are without Rob Gronkowski. I know how much the offense struggled over the first half of the season without Rob Gronkowski. I'm aware they lost 24-20 to Miami last week, but I watched that game. And those people who say things like, well, the New England offense stumbled without Gronkowski, or they clearly weren't themselves without Gronkowski, those people did not watch that game. Tom Brady was absolutely masterful, threw for 364 yards against a Miami defense that entered the game ranked 9th in points allowed. So look, the New England offense, no doubt, they're not as good without Gronkowski, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were over the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And the Baltimore offense is bad. I mean, over the first half of the year, we were saying, well, the Baltimore offense, they just haven't found their rhythm yet, and we sort of blamed injuries and the departure of Anquan Bolden. Whatever. We're in Week 16. Baltimore is 29th in the NFL in total offense. They just cannot score, and the Patriots are 10th in points allowed. Now, they do allow some yardage. They aren't great against the run, but Baltimore hasn't been able to run the ball against anybody. I just don't think the Ravens' offense is good enough to keep up with the New England offense, even without Rob Gronkowski, and even considering Baltimore has an excellent defense, and they do. So I do like the Patriots plus 2.5 in Baltimore in a big game for both teams. There you have it. Those are my 4 bets. I like Kansas City minus 6.5. I like New Orleans plus 3, Houston plus 10.5, and New England plus 2.5. I wish you best of luck this week in whatever you decide to do, just so long as your interests don't conflict with my interests.